Good morning, y'all. We are back with another edition of DNVR Rams Live. As always, I'm your host, Justin Michael. Got a fun show packed for you today. A lot to talk about for show since the Tuesday night showdown with Utah State. Obviously, a bit of a disappointing result, certainly a disappointing start, but I thought the Rams showed a lot of heart, showed a lot of fight, and certainly made it interesting down the stretch. We'll get into all of that. I'll talk about just what went wrong for the Rams initially, what allowed them to get back into the game, why I'm high on a couple of individuals, especially the youngsters, and why I still feel like CSU is in a good position to split the season series with Utah State. Much like San Diego State, that always felt like a fairly realistic outcome. I'd say the same about Boise State. That's going to be the regular season finale in Boise. That's going to be a tough matchup. If you drop that game, wouldn't be shocking. You already beat them at home. But I think splitting against the majority of the top teams was always fairly likely. And at this point, you're trying to take care of business at home, and you are trying to, maybe steal one or two more on the road. You've got Air Force, you've got UNLV. There's some opportunities to get a couple of wins away from Moby. But certainly at this point, you've got to win at home. We're going to talk about whether CSU should wear orange full time or at least significantly more. I think there's validity to what we have in the Toyota chat right now. No to more orange. It would make Orange Day less special. I'm going to get into that in just 2 seconds here. I did just briefly want to comment on something I saw from Alabama AD Greg Byrne, who is very anti-court storm, anti-field storm. Certainly over the last 10 years when Alabama football has lost, they've gotten field storm basically every time. Some people want to ban field storms. I say we ban those people. It's what makes college sports great. And him suggesting that you introduce forfeits as a way to prevent field storms is just absurd to me. You want to know how else you can avoid your team getting field stormed? Win the game. Win the damn game. And for him to come out and be like, if we said that the home team, if they storm the field on the court, they're going to lose this game right then and there, that will stop it. It irks me. Let the kids have fun, old man, as my guy Aaron's saying in the Toyota chat. I only got to actually participate in a field storm once. It was the 2014 homecoming game against Utah State. Incredible comeback. You have the big play to Rashard Higgins to set up a game-winning field goal from Jared Roberts. Everybody storms the field at Hughes. It was epic. One of my favorite college memories. It was fine. This happens hundreds and hundreds and times a year. I mean, really thousands if you include all levels in high school and all that. And it more or less happens every single day without incident. And you get like one or two a year where somebody runs into a player or some obnoxious jackass coming out of the stands tries to get in the face of a player or something like that. And if you're dumb enough to do something like that, then whatever happens to you, good luck. You probably had it coming. But to try and make it seem like this is some massive player safety issue, like this is this huge issue in college sports that they need to rectify, that they've got to get rid of these because it's just so bad and dangerous. It's just ridiculous. It's an AD of a university that's used to winning and is kind of a sore loser. Like, I've rooted for Alabama football over the years, mostly because of Nick Saban. Admittedly, my allegiance probably not as strong now that Saban's not there. But it's annoying. It's just like when a blue blood gets left out of the tournament and it's because they went like 500 in their league slate. And then all of a sudden you start hearing the commissioners talk about how, we need to change the admission process for teams into the tournament. And, we need more of these blue bloods. And well, earn it then. Earn your way into the tournament. Stop crying. I'm over it. But yeah, thank you for letting me rant about that for a second. Let's get into the main topic, or at least this intro topic, which is, should CSU wear orange more? I polled everybody on X earlier this week. 57% voted no. 43% voted yes to the question, should CSU switch to orange full time? Admittedly, I probably should have phrased it differently because I think a full time switch is unlikely for a variety of reasons. It would be very expensive to rebrand the whole university, as was pointed out to me. I don't know if you would necessarily have to rebrand the entire university to wear orange full time in sports. I don't think you have to change your name. It's been brought up to me that brand confusion could factor into the mix. My thinking is just that in the year 2025, is it really that big of a deal? Like, everybody's got Google in their pocket. There's not a whole lot of who is this, and if you don't know who it is, it's a pretty easy to find out. I do understand though that, like, kind of the whole point of college athletics from the university standpoint is it's advertising for your school. You don't want there to be brand confusion, which I understand that argument. The reason why I would argue in favor of it, and again, I don't think a full-time switch is going to happen, but the reason why I think if you were going to do it full-time, it would make sense is just the timing of everything happening with CSU right now. You're going into the Pac-12. You're trying to be splashy. You're trying to catch people's attention, and leaning into pumpkin and alfalfa, the orange and green uniforms more, which I think objectively are CSU's best looking uniforms in all of their sports. I just think they pop the most. And I think that especially from a visual standpoint within the stadium with the crowd and how that pops and stands out so much more, I just think it looks a whole lot cooler. I do completely understand that if you wear orange every time, that makes the orange out less special because it's not once a year at that point. You know, if you have ice cream every day, ice cream, I don't know, ice cream's still pretty good. If you have it every day, maybe that's not the best example, but you get what I mean. You know, it would make Ag Day in football and the orange ad experience in basketball less special if you did wear them more than once a season. I just see the visuals every year and I see the crowd shots and I see how much it pops. And I think there's an argument you could at least wear it a couple times a year. Maybe in basketball, you break them out for big time conference games. Like, it's San Diego State. They've had success against them historically. I think they are like 4-0 against the Aztecs, and the orange uniforms might be 5 now. You know, maybe you throw like UNLV or New Mexico into that equation. I just think it looks awesome. Now, for a lot of reasons, I don't think it would happen full time. I think the colors green and gold mean a whole lot to CSU. Those colors have meaning, and I've talked about that as a traditionalist, a purist when it comes to college athletics. It's those colors hold a lot of weight. It's not just colors. I think where this gets kind of complicated is you're also embracing your history by wearing orange and green. So you'd be abandoning a more recent history, a more established history of late, but leaning into your roots at that point. And that's why I think you could talk me into it. It would be weird to not have green and gold. I don't think you would just completely go away from it. It would essentially just, you'd kind of wear it as an alternate uniform at that point. I don't think it's going to happen for a whole lot of reasons, but I do think there's validity to the argument that going into the Pac-12, when you're trying to make a splash, when you're trying to catch people's attention, leaning into really swaggy uniforms, which they are, they pop, man, they look cool, is a great way to generate excitement. It's a great way to at least get people talking, because whether you like it or not, people would be talking about this. Did you hear CSU is going orange and green full time? I just think that the swag component, especially as an Under Armour school, which, you know, admittedly isn't the best, they do pretty well by CSU with our alternates, the Ag Days, the throwbacks, you know, these are sweet. I just think that it's a way that you could generate some excitement. I think those Ag Day helmets in football are so cool. This current version is my favorite version of the Ag Day uniforms. I know that's a big debate amongst the fans too. Even if you were going to do it, which ones would you do? Do you bring back the green helmet with the orange bone horns at that point? Do you go full pumpkin like they did early on in the process? I thought the full pumpkin look was atrocious. I'm not gonna. I just thought it looked whack. But I think they really have it now. But I don't know. Like I said, I think it's fun to debate. I think it could be something you do a little bit more. I think it's unlikely that they switch to it full time. But especially from a rebranding the whole school standpoint, I just don't think that's super realistic. As Aaron says, learned a long time ago, nothing rhymes with orange. So Knights of the Green and Gold would be a tough play in the fight song. There's a lot of things that would get kind of complicated with it, especially, again, if you were fully rebranding, which isn't really what I'm saying. You'd still be the Colorado State Rams. You wouldn't change the fight song. You'd just wear orange more in sports. You just decide, we like these throwbacks. They pop. They look cool. We're going to wear them more frequently because they stand out more. But I understand there are problems like that. Like if they're wearing orange every week and then the fight song is Knights of the Green and Gold and nothing says Rams, everything says Aggies, would you have orange uniforms that say Rams instead of Aggies? I don't know. There's a million things you would have to consider at that standpoint. I just think the pros would be you're embracing tradition, which I can be down with. More vibrant visuals. It stands out a lot more, especially with the crowd. It's exactly why the Denver Broncos switched to orange full time. You think back to when they were wearing blue. I think objectively, the white pants with the blue jersey, the blue top might be a better looking uniform than when they went to orange, but the orange pops more in the stands, and that's powerful from a stadium shot standpoint. It's just so much more cohesive as well. Like in the early 2000s, you'd have some people in orange, you'd have a lot of people in blue, a lot of people in white, and that's still the case to an extent, but it's mostly a sea of orange. And I do think that to an extent, CSU kind of has that problem. Like green just doesn't stand out that much in the crowd, and I don't know. I just think there'd be some pros to it. The cons, obviously, though, like we said, are brand confusion. And even though you would be embracing your roots, you're moving away from a more recent history. And I think back to like all of the incredible moments in green and gold under Sonny Lubick, for instance. Like it would be weird to no longer have that be part of our identity. I understand that the colors mean a whole lot. It's not just colors, like it's symbolism. There's a whole lot that goes into that. I get it. I also get the orange out would be less special. I think you're trying to generate excitement. And when you're in a position that CSU is in right now, where you're trying to build hype for your program, for your new league, little things like uniform changes and stuff like that are a way to generate excitement. Now, my guess is if you were to ask people like Jay Norvell, probably would not be in favor of it. I mean, he's old school. Look, we've basically gone away from the alternates outside of the, Ag Day and State Pride under Norvell. We're not wearing the white bone horns anymore. It's not, multiple pant combinations. Could argue that might be detrimental as a traditionalist. I'm okay with it because, again, I think the whole process has gotten kind of out of whack, but they're cool. They're just cool is what it comes down to. And I would like to see them wear it more, but I definitely don't see a full-time switch happening anytime soon. Got in the Toyota chat. What's next? Moving back to the Bears or the Bulldogs as a mascot? I get it. You're selectively choosing what tradition and what history to embrace at that point, basically purely for swag purposes. There's some arguments that that's a little bit silly, but I don't know. I think it's fun to think about, and I think especially just given with the move to the Pac-12, it makes it maybe more realistic than it ever would have been. Don't anticipate it. But it was off the record. He certainly didn't come in to the press room thinking like, oh, like write this column. But John Weber came in after Ag Day into the media room after the basketball game and was like, "Do you guys think we should just switch to orange full time?" He's tongue in cheek, but all of us were like, "Yeah, hell yeah, it looks awesome." And he was like, "Yeah, me too." So I don't know. It's something that I think they've at least considered. Again, like I'm not reporting CSU officially considering this change or anything like that, but it's certainly been something that we've debated as a fan base basically for the last 15 years. I think the orange jet scenes are some of the best that we have visually, and it would be interesting. That's all I'm saying. We're going to move on. We're going to get into basketball takeaways, talk about late night matchup with Utah State. Hope everybody was able to caffeine up and make it through that. It was supposed to be a 9 p.m. start, ended up being 9:15. Knew that was going to happen. Kind of ridiculous, though. That's a pre-recorded dog show that the game got pushed by for Fox. And that's where, especially with the Pac-12 stuff and the media rights, when people are anti-streaming, and I understand it's maybe not perfect, but when people are anti, considering somebody like Amazon or Apple because you need that exposure on TV, it's like, how great is the TV exposure with the Fox contract when we're getting pushed to 9:15 for a matchup between two of the top 3 teams in the league that has big time implications in the standings. We're getting pushed for a dog show. It's not even live, pre-recorded. I kind of hate the TV deals the Mountain West has at the moment. If you don't get that. All right, let's pay some bills. Let's get into the takeaways. Let's shout out our homies over at Game Time. Nobody's been doing it better than Game Time of late. Game Time makes it easier than ever to get the best deals on all your favorite events. They've got tickets for sports. They've got concerts. They've got comedy. They've got theater. You name it, they've got it. They're like, if this was an old school 90s movie, they'd be like the dude with the trench coat, open it up, got like all the knickknacks for sale on Canal Street in New York City or something like that. That's Game Time, but it's great deals and great access to seats and not, knock off Gucci and stuff like that. With the Game Time Picks curation feature, it's making it easier than ever to get the great deals. It's just going to show you, bam, this is the best we have to offer in terms of price, in terms of, value. If you can get cheap seats, but you might be able to get an awesome deal on, some front row seats. If somebody's trying to sell last minute, it's just going to show you the best that they have to offer. They've got all-in pricing. The price you see, that's the price you pay. You're not going to get hit with 8 million fees later. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account. Use that code DNVR for $20 off your first order. Terms to apply. Again, create an account, redeem that code DNVR for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. We also got to shout out Toyota, the official vehicle of DNVR. Also a proud partner of CSU Athletics, which we love. Trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA for generations. Toyota has built durable legends destined for greatness and perfect for Colorado. Whether you're conquering off-road trails or hauling the weight of the world, there's a Toyota truck that's just right for you. Check out the Tacoma and the Land Cruiser. They have 17 models with available all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive like the Epic 4Runner. They also offer more low and zero-emission vehicles combined than any other automaker to give customers numerous choices to reduce their carbon footprint. 16 hybrid vehicles to choose from, like the Tundra iForce Max hybrid truck, not to be outdone. Toyota SUVs take command on the road and on the trail, so you can explore the road less traveled without sacrificing smooth city rides in SUVs like the RAV4 and Grand Highlander. Toyota, a proud partner of CSU Athletics and the official vehicle of DNVR. Toyota, let's go places. All right. Colton says, I think the amount of orange we wear is perfect, but would like more orange variations of CSU hoodies to buy. That's a good point. I actually think 10, 12 years ago, there was a lot more Ag Day merch in the bookstore and stuff. I've got 3 or 4 different Ag Day iteration hoodies that whenever I bust them out, they're all like 10 plus years old and worn out. But whenever I bust them out, people kind of lose it. Feels like we could use a little bit more variety and selection. And again, I mean, ultimately, I just wish we were a Nike school. I mean, a Jordan school if we're really striving for the stars here. But I just think from a branding standpoint, from an apparel standpoint, it would be great. I'm not anti Under Armour by any means. I've got plenty of Under Armour products I like. I think their sweats and joggers are great. The hoodies and all that, it's all fine. Where it really just hurts CSU, especially with recruiting, is on the cleat side, and especially with basketball shoes. The kids just don't really want to wear Under Armour for the most part. Having Curry be a part of the brand helps a little bit. It's much better than it was, in like 2014 or something like that, where every Under Armour school, it looks like their schools are wearing stock shoes out there or something like that. So they've upped their game for sure, but there's just more weight when you have that Nike brand. It carries a little bit more with the kids these days. All right, let's get into the Utah State game. I'll give a Mountain West power ranking later on. I'll comment on a report from the Denver Post that came out. Talk about the play calling stuff with the offensive coordinator, Jay Norvell, potentially being coy with all this. I stand by my reporting, for the record. I'm not going back on that or anything like that, but it has been weird to see how that process has played out. Let's get into it. Anyways, they lost 93-85, but that certainly was much closer than it could have been. Go down by 23 in the first half. Was 8-0 Utah State before CSU even recorded a shot attempt in this one. A couple of really ugly turnovers right out of the gate. Neat Clifford had one. Cayenne had one. Kyan had a rough game in the first half. I mean, he had 4 turnovers before he scored a point, and I think CSU as a team had like 9 turnovers in the first 15 minutes, only 2 the rest of the way. It was a big factor in what allowed Utah State to establish that early lead, and then obviously cleaning things up is a big part of what allowed the Rams to claw back into it, as well as just shot making. I didn't think the shot selection was poor in the first half or anything like that. Looks just weren't falling. Those looks did fall in the second half, and then Utah State, like, if you hit a 3 every minute, you're gonna win a lot of games. And for them to create those turnovers, which immediately led to 3s the other way, it was about as brutal of a start as you could have in a building that's already hostile. I mean, you got to credit the Utah State student section. I would argue they're the loudest and most impactful in the Mountain West on a consistent basis. I mean, they're there like an hour before tip. They show up, they're into it. A little bit quirky, a little bit of an odd bunch. The glove thing is weird. It's been pointed out to me online that it's actually a sign of respect. They only do it for big time opponents. It apparently amplifies the noise when they're clapping. Never would have thought about that. All I could think about is how sweaty my hands would be in those silicone gloves. Would not want to rock those for a couple of hours there. But it's a tough place to win. CSU had actually won, I believe, 2 of 3 in Logan going into that. It's a place they've been pretty competitive under Medved, but it's a tough place to pull out wins. And when you have that kind of start in a hostile setting, man, it just compounds on you. And credit Utah State. Like, they took control of the game right from the get-go. It's 8-0 right out of the bag before you can even get settled in, open up your snacks. And like, oh man, that escalated quickly. And you just keep thinking they're going to slow down. And for the first 6, 7, 8 minutes, it just wasn't the case. They went 6 for 6 from beyond the arc over those first 6 minutes. I think 3 or 4 different guys hit a 3 in that process. I mean, they were just overwhelming CSU on both sides of the ball, generally outclassing them to begin the game. I thought the Rams did a nice job at a point in that first half of kind of steadying the boat and fighting their way back into it. You ultimately pull within 15 going into the break. Had a chance, I thought, to cut it to single digits. Credit Utah State for not allowing CSU to do that, but it gave you an opportunity. Now, coming out of the break, it wasn't all that encouraging of a start. They went right back down 20 again. And I'm just kind of sitting there like, man, cannot believe we stayed up all night for this, waited around all day, delayed tip for the freaking dog show for this type of performance. And it felt kind of pretty peak CSU in these late night type games. They just have not been super friendly to the Rams in basketball or football the last couple of years. Felt like peak Ram life. And then all of a sudden, CSU kind of fights their way back into it. Now, I will say, I don't think Utah State was ever truly in danger of blowing this game. There was an opportunity in that final minute. Had CSU been able to pull within 2 possessions, you're down 7, get a great look in the paint to Nick Clifford against a smaller defender, just misses it, get another look from deep from Cayenne, and he had hit 3 straight from deep at that point. Like, you're okay with both of those shots. Those are good opportunities from guys that were scoring a ton at the moment. I didn't have any beef with that. They didn't fall. They ran out of gas. But credit CSU for not laying down, because I do think this very easily could have been a 25+ point loss. Like, you could have just laid down and let them bury you. And instead, this Rams team, they showed a lot of heart. They fought their way in it, even in the last minute. Like, they never gave up. And I thought that was encouraging. I thought the shot making in particular in the second half was tremendous. I mean, if Nick is going to be able to stretch the floor and also create for himself and get those mid-range looks, he loves that little baseline turnaround jumper. I hit it 2 or 3 times in the game. The announcers were just raving about him, calling him the best player in the league, which obviously Drew Meyer from Utah State and New Mexico supporters. I think it's pretty clear he's one of the top 2 or 3 players in the league. He's probably the best NBA prospect in this cycle. He was awesome. You can't really ask much more from what you got out of Nick Clifford in this game. He had 24 points, 16 rebounds. He played all 40 minutes. Now, him dropping 50, that sure would have been great. But, I mean, 24 and 16 on the road in that type of setting, especially coming off of, San Diego State, and they've just had the really tough stretch here where they played a lot of physical teams that wear you down. To have that type of performance, in that type of setting, that's exactly what you want to see. It was exactly what they would have needed from him to have a chance against New Mexico. Neek played well enough to give CSU a shot. And on top of that, you got really great performances from Kyan Evans, particularly in the second half. Again, it was a slow start for him. He had 4 turnovers before he scored, and then he turned it on, man. He had 14 points in that second half, 4-7 from the floor, 3 of 6 from deep. And what I love about him, this is what I wrote the other day, is I love that he's a guy that can score anywhere. He's not just someone that shoots the ball well in his home gym, which is pretty common in college basketball, especially. Some of his best shooting performances this season have come in Reno, have come in Viejas, Albuquerque, and now Logan. Like, this is a guy, when the lights are bright, it kind of brings it out of him. And that dunk that he threw in the second half, that's the best dunk of the season so far. He had a nice one. I think it was early in this season. It was either early on in the non-conference slate this year or late in the Mountain West slate last year. I can't remember, where Kyan threw a nice dunk. It wasn't as impressive as the one he threw in this game. But I tweeted something along the lines of, man, I didn't know Kyan had that in him. And his mom was giving me a hard time, just being like, you knew he could do that. You go back and you look at his high school highlights. It's clear, like, he's a baller. It's not surprising that he is scoring at the rate that he is. He has always had that potential. I have always talked up his maturity, and I think this is a perfect example of it. One of the things that I really loved about him last year is he didn't come out he's only playing like 10 minutes a game, but he was really heady during those plays. He's not hunting his shot at that point, trying to jack up a bunch of attempts, trying to get his in the small stretch. He was just trying to maintain the flow within the offense, facilitating, making the right pass, being an impactful defender, just doing the little things right. And I think for a sophomore guard who's in his first year as a starter, in this type of setting, to be able to brush off a brutal start. I mean, those first 20 minutes are as bad as he's looked all season. And then for him to turn it on the way that he did, that's a testament to his maturity and his mentality. And I really think he's only scratching the surface, guys. I'm really excited about the possibilities for this kid. I just think somebody that can create his own shot like that and has, Curry range, like, I'm not calling him Steph Curry, but somebody that can really effortlessly stretch the floor for you and has just a gorgeous jump shot. He's the most consistent 3-point shooter on the team at this point. For him to be demonstrating what he's demonstrated in these type of settings now with some consistency is highly, highly encouraging. He's growing as a facilitator. His best shooting performances have been on the road. He's had a couple of games where he's reset his high watermark in assists, though, in league games at home. So he's doing a little bit of everything. He can create turnovers for you. Outside of Neek, he's probably the best guy to pick your pocket and create an offensive possession for you that way. But I was really impressed with him. And obviously I'm still hoping to see CSU make some type of run. I'm hoping to see them finish in the top 3, make some magic potentially in the Mountain West tournament. Cause I think this team could win the tournament. Like, they don't match up super well with New Mexico. Nobody seems to. You never know, though. You get them a third time, or maybe somebody else knocks them out for you, and you get the benefit that way. I don't think there's anybody in this league, even, and I would have said this even if they lost by 20, like, I still feel like CSU has a good opportunity to split with Utah State in Fort Collins. There's nobody in the league that I feel like is just miles above, other than New Mexico, and like, they have some consistency issues. At least they have the last couple of years. They've been very consistent this year, outside of the weird week in December where they struggled with San Jose State and New Mexico State. But like, Utah State, Boise, San Diego State, nobody feels unbeatable this year. Nobody feels like, if we get them, like, we've just got no shot, especially in a neutral setting like Vegas. San Diego State fans, they travel well. New Mexico fans are definitely going to pack the Thomas and Mack Center this year. But I think this Rams team is trending in the right direction. Now I'm going to give some more takeaways. We're going to talk about some more individuals, talk about CSU, some things they need to do better, some things They are doing well as well. And then we're going to set the scene for an important matchup with Wyoming. Real quick, though, do need to shout out Coors Light, who encourages you to choose a chill mindset. If you listen to the show often enough at this point, you guys could probably do some of these reads for me. But between work, between what social media and life in general throws our way, easy to get stressed, easy to not be a chill guy. Coors Light says, nah, choose that chill state of mind. That's different for everybody. I think everybody has those mundane activities. I like building Legos. Like if I'm super stressed, super anxious, I like doing that. I like taking a walk, with the dog. I like doing yard work. I think it's really rewarding. You break a sweat a little bit. You get to see a finished product. Do the little things, man. Put yourself in a chill state of mind. And then when you earn it, kick back, relax with an ice cold Coors Light. When the mountains turn blue, it says cold as the Rockies. Coors Light is cold lagered, cold filtered, and cold packaged for a smoother finish. When you embrace a chill mindset, it's a good time to choose chill and crack open a Coors Light. Choose chill this winter, then reach for a Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door by visiting CoorsLight.com/DNVR, or you can find it pretty much anywhere that sells beer. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. You guys are probably tuned in on YouTube right now. If you're commenting, you certainly are. But if you haven't heard, you can now stream DNVR Sports on your TV. In addition to, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, the normal stuff, we're available on Samsung TV channel 2348, Xfinity channel 4072. We're on Xumo Play, and more platforms will be announced shortly. All you got to do is search DNVR into your search function. Maybe you've got the mic function. Some of those fancy remotes do. Boom. Can tune in, watch us on the couch if you do. Snap a picture, send it to inthewild@thednvr.com. We're going to feature some submissions live on the show. Also going to be picking some lucky winners for some free DNVR merch. I know you guys, especially those of you that are active in the Toyota chat, you guys are loyalists, but just snap a picture real quick on your TV, send it on over. Maybe you win yourself a Ram shirt. Be a perfect opportunity to get the bronze boot shirt we have with the matchup with Wyoming coming up. I'm going to set the scene for that Wyoming matchup here just momentarily. I have a couple more takeaways I want to talk about, a couple more individuals. Like I said, Neek was as good as you could hope for in this type of setting. 24-16 is just an absurd performance. Played all 40 minutes while trying to guard their best players. Mason Falslev certainly had a great game for Utah State. 22 points, went 4 of 6 from deep, but Martinez went 4 of 7. They had another guy go 3 of 4. Like they had a lot of dudes hot in this matchup, and it was tough to keep up with. But what's encouraging from CSU standpoint, and Kevin Lytle actually pointed this out on Twitter. If you look past the first 15 minutes, CSU actually outscored New Mexico they outscored them over the final 30 minutes. So if you take away the first 10 minutes, CSU outscored New Mexico, or Jesus Christ. If you take away the first 10 minutes, CSU outscored Utah State. That is the team we're talking about, 73-61. Over the final 30 minutes of the game, they outscored them by 10, I think, in a key stretch in that second half to make things interesting. Got a couple of good looks. They didn't fall for you, but you can't be too upset, especially given the shot making that you got from those guys that missed those final looks. Cayenne, Neek, they were tremendous in the second half. A really good game from Jalen Crocker-Johnson as well, though. 17 points, 6 of 9 from the floor. He hit a couple of threes, got to the free throw line. I still would like guys like him and Bemba to have more success on the glass. Bemba and Crocker-Johnson combined for 5 boards. You need more than that. Like Neek pulling down 16 rebounds, 14 defensive boards every game. That's not necessarily a sustainable way to play, and I do feel like down the stretch in that San Diego State game, as well as in this Utah State matchup, the Rams were really dependent on Neek to clean things up. And he's a great rebounder, so he can do that for you. But I would like more from the bigs there. And I think Medved would as well, which is why outside the last 2 games, he hasn't been available these last 2, but it's why Nikola Japa has kind of earned some playing time here, as they need their bigs to be more impactful on the glass. Jorgensen did have 5 points. He hit a huge 3 in that second half that snapped a a cold stretch. I think him and Cronker Johnson, especially with what they bring to the table offensively, have really high ceilings in this system under Nico Medved. They're bigs that can stretch the floor, that can pass the ball, that aren't afraid to put it on the floor a little bit more. Crocker Johnson than Jorgensen, but he's shown he'll throw a little spin move on you and try and finish off the glass. They both got really nice touch. Where they both have to grow is the defensive side as well as the rebounding side. That takes time. It's just getting used to the pace and the physicality of this league and this level. It's a growing process, but they do need them to grow, especially on the defensive side and on the glass. And then, with Crocker Johnson, like, they just got to keep him out of foul trouble. 17 points, 6 and 9 from the floor, but he had 4 fouls, so he only played 28 minutes. Would have been nice to have him out there for 5 more minutes or so. Very similar to the New Mexico game, where it's like Cayenne's the only one doing much of anything offensively, but he's in foul trouble and they can't keep him on the floor. That's a tough spot to be in. What's encouraging is the growth you're seeing from both Cayenne and Jalen Crocker Johnson and Jorgensen, all these young guys that are getting playing time, as you're seeing them produce with more consistency, but you're also seeing a level of confidence rise as the season progresses, which is huge because they're not scared of the moment. They're playing impactful minutes and they're not afraid to put up big shots in tight games and against league competition. Like they're not scared of the smoke or anything like that. It's great to see. But the development of those guys, assuming that you can retain them, it's increasingly challenging in this modern landscape. I think we all understand that. The transfer portal process, whenever you have young talent pop, it's always in the back of your mind, am I going to be able to hang on to this guy? And it's going to be crucial if you're CSU. All the money you're giving to Nick this season, you've got to give to Cayenne in the off season because he's somebody they've got to build around. But I think those two can be the pillars of a pretty dang good team. And you throw Bemba and Jorgensen and some of these other guys in the mix as well, and I'm pretty encouraged about the direction of the program right now. Like, I'm not trying to just completely look forward to the future or anything like that. Again, I think this team is potentially poised to make a run in Las Vegas, to potentially win the conference tournament. That was a bold prediction I had in my preseason predictions, that CSU would struggle a little bit out of the gate. They'd be much more dangerous come February and March than they were in November. That part has been true. Now we'll see. Can they make me look really smart and also really regretful? Because if they do win the Mountain West tournament and I predicted that and didn't place a preseason bet or something like that, it's gonna sting a little bit. But how cool would that be, especially after the last couple of years? I talked about this actually the other day with Tyler King on his podcast, and you should certainly go subscribe to it, doing a podcast on basketball in the Mountain Time Zone, which I think is a fun concept. Denver Nuggets talk, but also CSU and CU, probably a little bit broader college hoops on a national level as well. But I think that's going to be a cool pod. I had a lot of fun on the show with him, but that was one of the things that he mentioned was it would feel kind of fitting after getting to the semis a couple of times with, Roddy and Stevens, and then last year as well, for this team to break through and win it after those teams weren't able to. It would feel kind of cool, and it'd be pretty neat given the amount of redemption stories you have on this team. That's one of the things that I've written a couple of times is this group's easy to root for because they all have something to prove. They've all got a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. You got Ethan Morton. He started at Purdue a couple of years ago, lost his spot. He's trying to prove he can still ball. And I think he brings a level of intensity, particularly on the defensive side, but just in general, I think he has a vibe that is good. He brings fight in some of these intense games, especially when things get tight or chippy. Like, I think he just brings a little bit of FU attitude, which I've loved to see. But, Keshawn Williams and Bowen Bourne are trying to prove that they can score like they did at a previous time. And, Neat Clifford's trying to prove, there's a reason he was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school. There's a reason, NBA teams have him on their draft boards. And, even people like Kyan Evans, like, I'm sure he felt like he should have been recruited by bigger schools than he was. But all of them have something to prove, and all of them are kind of leaning into their roles. There's not a lot of selfishness. It's selflessness. And I just think that this group, come March, they're going to be poised to potentially be a pretty tough out in the Mountain West tournament. Now, you do want to finish top 3 because if you fall into that 4 or 5 game, although you get the day 1 bye, which is huge, you certainly don't want to fall out of the top 5. But it can be a pretty tough draw, and then a lot of times you end up getting the 1 seed after that. So it's not the easiest path. You're going to have to beat some good teams one way or another if you win the conference tournament. It comes down to that. But play your way into position. You're 2 games behind Utah State at the moment, but you still get to play them at home. So if you can win that game in Fort Collins, you pull within a game there, and you look at Utah State's schedule, like it's not super easy. Like they still got to play San Diego State. They got to go to the Pit on Saturday. Like there's an opportunity for them to potentially drop a couple here late and, potentially even earn that 2 seed. So it's still very much in play at this point. I think at least earning the 3 seed should be the goal based on where you are at this stage of the season. Having a backslide, dropping a game like Wyoming, for instance, or Air Force, or one of these, that'd be a bummer because it's really going to hurt you now that you've got Boise State, San Diego State, and CSU all sitting there at 9-4 in the league. But you've all got to play each other, and you've got a second opportunity against Boise State. Potentially sweeping them would be huge from a tiebreaker standpoint. Avoiding getting swept by Utah State would be huge. You were able to do that against San Diego State already. And then can you take care of business against some lesser competition? You've got to respect Wyoming, certainly. We're going to talk about them in just a second. But Air Force has been a team that has been a bit of a thorn in your side. I know they suck this year, but Ethan Taylor could get hot. You've got to look out for them. Nevada's playing better of late. They're coming to Fort Collins. Is that a team that could catch you in your own building? You need to avoid losing at home at this point, I think, is the main goal. And then, take care of business against the teams you should. Go beat Air Force, steal one of, if you can, UNLV and Boise State on the road. I think UNLV is a very winnable game. It's not a super hostile scenario, but we'll see. They're so hot and cold. Nevada too. Like Nevada could come into Fort Collins and beat CSU by double digits, and it wouldn't be that surprising to me. They could also lose by 30, and you'd be like, yeah, that's Steve Alford team. They're so hot and cold. It's weird, but you're in a good spot. Like I said, you need a little bit of help to get that 2 seed, but this performance against Utah State doesn't change my outlook for the rest of the season. I think you're still in a really good spot to potentially make a little bit of noise. But you can't overlook anybody, and that starts with Wyoming. All right, take a breather real quick there. Let's talk Wyoming, and we'll do a Mountain West power ranking. Then we'll get on out of here. Give some questions, comments, etc. If you have anything like that, throw them in the Toyota chat. Got a little less than 20 minutes left in the show here today. We'll get to as many of them as we can, whether that's on the topics earlier, wearing orange, whether that's hoops, football, you name it, we'll get to it. You've got a Wyoming team coming to town that's 2-5 over their last 7 since CSU beat them in Laramie. And it feels like they're playing some of their best basketball of the season. They had New Mexico on the ropes last night in Albuquerque. New Mexico did not play well. It was a weirdly officiated game, but the Lobos missed a bunch of layups. It was sloppy. It was playing to their competition, which is one of the things I actually asked about Jeff Grammer. That would be the thing that would have me hesitant in backing this UNM team. They have been a lot more consistent this year than they were a year ago. But they have these moments like last year where they lose to Air Force at home and you're sitting there scratching your head. Like how does a team with that much talent, that much athleticism fall flat in that type of scenario? I don't know. I'm not the biggest Patino guy. It's tough to argue against the success that they're having right now. But Wyoming was just another game in what's been a string of frisky performances from them. They are 2-5 over their last 7, but they should have beat San Diego State at home. They took Utah State to the wire. They had New Mexico on the ropes last night. Like they're a team that can get hot on you. They have some offensive versatility. Last night they were just spamming the pick and roll against New Mexico. UNM struggled to handle it for a lot of the night. Kind of turned into a rock fight, as Aaron says in the Toyota chat. And I think the disparity in depth ultimately just proved to be too much for them to overcome in the end. But it was the perfect example of why you can't overlook this Wyoming team. Agbim is certainly one of the better scorers in the conference, and you've got to credit Sundance Wicks. Like, they're playing really hard. You know that they're going to come into Fort Collins just chomping at the bit to play spoilers. Like, nothing would please them more than potentially having CSU fall out of the top 5 because of Wyoming. Same deal. Like, they're a team I think you would like to avoid in Vegas. For one, you just don't want to have to play your biggest rival 3 times in a year. And we've seen that scenario come up, under Medved, where you sweep them in the regular season and then get upset in the Mountain West tournament. Like, I'll never forget. I think was that Thistlewood and Kendall Moore's second year or something like that. Those guys just being heartbroken in the locker room, not even knowing what to say. San Jose State, Nevada, Wyoming, they kind of feel like the 3 frisky teams that could potentially really mess your day up on day 1 or day 2 in the Mountain West tournament. I don't think any of those teams are going to win it, but I certainly think they might prevent one of the teams in the top 5 from doing so. And even before we get to Vegas, you've got to avoid a slip up on Saturday with Wyoming coming to town. Getting that sweep would be huge. I feel like CSU is in a good spot. Like, I know they didn't play tremendous against Utah State. They played pretty good down the stretch, but obviously the slow start was brutal. But I just feel like the Rams are kind of poised at this position of the season to largely do what we expect them to do. Like, take care of business against teams like Wyoming and Air Force, and knock on wood, hopefully like UNLV and Nevada. I think you probably lose in Boise. That's a tough game. But could you go, 6-1, 7-1? Not how many games we got left? 7 or 8 at this point. I think it's 7. Could you go 6-1 or 5-2, 4-3 is realistic, but you would like to avoid that. Just put yourself in a position to secure that number 3 spot. Don't let Agbeam get going. We're going to talk about him more so on tomorrow's show. I'm going to catch up with Alex Taylor, who is the Pokes beat writer. We're going to get into all that, set the scene for it. I'll ask him his thoughts on this frisky Wyoming team, what's allowed them to be competitive against some of these top teams they punched up, also kind of what's prevented them from breaking through to that next level. I think the fact that they've even been as competent as they have been, given the weird offseason they had and all the talent they lost and the Jeff Linder scenario and all that, like it's been a weird 2 or 3 years for Wyoming basketball, and it's going to be a really tough place to sustain any type of success in the portal era. They just don't have the financial backing to hang on to top guys, and we've seen that the last couple of years. Some of their top guys have gone elsewhere, even to programs like the Missouri Valley and stuff, just because they have more financial backing than Wyoming. But in a CSU Wyoming matchup, all bets are off. It's a cliche, it's a stereotype, or stereotypical response, but throw out the records in a rivalry game. That's the case. You got to take care of business. We'll get more into that matchup tomorrow when we have Alex Taylor on the show. Looking forward to, I believe, having him on for the first time. Good buddy of mine. We've hung out quite a few times, like in Vegas for the Mountain West tournament. I'm tight with most of the Wyoming beat. Funny enough, like even Cody Tucker's one of my better friends in media, and I think that dude hates CSU more than just about anybody I know. Let's get into the Mountain West Power Ranking. Like I said, if you got any questions, comments, throw them my way. We've got 10 minutes or so to fill here before we get out of here. But we will do the Mountain West Power Ranking for this week. Not a ton of movement, fairly close to what you'd see in the standings, but a little bit of discrepancy there. We'll start from the bottom. We'll work our way to the top. We don't have a graphic this week. That was my fault. Did not get it in soon enough, but we'll just kind of rapid fire through it because there's not that much movement from last week anyways. At 11, pretty easy. Air Force, they're 3-22 this year. They're 0-14 in the Mountain West, and they are currently riding a 15-game losing streak. I still feel like they're good enough to beat someone. And again, like in the Springs, you don't want to overlook them. They could get hot from 3. Ethan Taylor could go off on you. But I am a little surprised that they're this bad. Like you certainly expected them to be one of the 2 worst teams in the conference, but 0-14, 3-22 on the year. I don't know if I saw that coming. Fresno State at 10, they're 5-20. They're 1-13, currently riding a 7-game losing streak. For a couple of games there, I felt like they had kind of figured it out and were maybe going to be a little bit more of a tough out down the stretch. Now it kind of feels like they had a little bit of a revival there. They had a little bit of a breakthrough, but then it still didn't result in winning. And now they've kind of had a backslide and they've been less competitive again these last couple. Still, look out. They got some size. They could be a little bit wonky in the tournament. I've got Wyoming at 9, given that they're on a 4-game losing streak, 11-14 on the year. They're 4-10 in the league. I think 6 through 9, depending on the day, are all pretty flexible. But we'll put San Jose State at 8, just above Wyoming. They're 12-14, 2-game losing streak. I feel for them, man. They had San Diego State on the ropes again, fell through, end up losing by 3. I don't know what to make of San Diego State at this point. I still feel like their ceiling is top 3, and just because of the athleticism they have, guys like Miles Bird and Guap, like they have an opportunity to be pretty dangerous if they can figure things out. Just the lack of consistency. I think they really lack a point guard. Losing Lamont Butler was pretty brutal for them. They could have really benefited from signing a guy like Cardenas, I think. But I've got San Jose State at 8. UNLV at 7. They've won 2 in a row, 13-12, 7-7. I had to dog them last week. Maybe that's what it needed. They just need a little bit of motivation. Nevada at 6. They're on a 2-game win streak. They've looked a little more competent of late. I still feel like they're the biggest disappointment in the conference this season. San Diego State falls to 5. They have not played a complete game in like a month. They've won 4 or 5 games they should have lost, which is maybe a testament to their resilience. If they keep messing around like this, though, they're going to get bounced day 1 in the Mountain West tournament, which would be crazy to see. Just the lack of offensive consistency with that group is very confusing because they can turn it on. You see it. They're down 17 at the half, and then they come out and they jack up a couple threes. They get hot. Then they have these cold stretches. It's just they're all over the map. Really weird year for that program. I know they got hit by the portal pretty hard in their defense, but certainly thought we would see more consistency with them. I was arguing at the beginning of the year that people were too down on them, and maybe I was giving that brand a little bit too much respect. I still inherently I will respect San Diego State too much until we just have overwhelming audience or overwhelming evidence, I should say, that the run is done from them. Like, it's kind of how I feel about the Chiefs too. I know they just got blown out in the Super Bowl, but I'm just going to give them the benefit of the doubt until I can't anymore. Maybe we're getting there though. The writing has been kind of on the wall for a while now. All right, Boise State, I've got them at 4, 17-7, 9-4. They're on a 4-game win streak. They look really good right now. I think CSU will be glad that they got that game at home earlier in the year. I do have CSU at 3. I think CSU, Boise, you could argue either way. I mean, I know Boise is on a 4-game winning streak where CSU is 1-2 in their last 3. I would say quality of competition should be a factor there, as well as head-to-head. I think they're basically on par with each other. It just kind of depends on the day. I think New Mexico is in a league of their own at 1, and then Utah State is in that second tier at the moment, but I think they're closer to CSU and Boise State than I think they are to New Mexico at this stage. All right. That's our power rankings. Some games to watch this weekend that'll have a big impact on the power rankings moving forward, as well as the standings, certainly. CSU Wyoming is the game we'll all be locked into, but at the same time, you've got a big one between Utah State and New Mexico. Ram fans should be rooting for the Lobos in this one. I think New Mexico winning out in the regular season, getting a top 25 ranking going into the postseason would be good for the respect that the conference gets on a national level. Been a little bit down this year after what was probably at least in the conversation for the strongest 3-year stretch the league had ever had. This year, I still think they're probably going to get 3 teams in, but it's looking like 2 is a very realistic possibility. So just from a respect standpoint for the league, I think New Mexico closing strong would be good. I also think you can't catch New Mexico if you're CSU at this point, outside of them just having a total collapse. You would need them to lose like 4 games, and that's just not going to happen. So, root for the demise of Utah State a little bit because you can potentially pass them for the 2 seed. Boise State also in action. They're playing in Viejas against San Diego State. This is a big game for me because if they look how both of these teams have looked over the last 2 weeks, Boise State should beat the hell out of them. I also wonder if San Diego State rises to the occasion in their own building. We get a little bit of, we're still that guy, and they come out and they beat a Boise State team that's been hot of late. It's a really important game, though, for both of these teams. You're tied in the standings. Much like CSU, you would love to finish top 3, avoid that 4 or 5 matchup where you're probably playing a team like San Diego State or Boise State or CSU day 1 in the tournament. Just some final thoughts. If you got any questions, comments, etc., get them here. We can answer them. But shout out to David Roddy. He had 31 points, hit 9 threes for Philly's G League affiliate yesterday morning. Didn't know that they have G League games at like 9 a.m. On a Wednesday, but you learn something new every day. That was great. He had signed a 10-day contract with Philly. Hopefully he at least gets an opportunity to play a game or 2 for the Sixers. He's too good for the G League. Like, I'm not shocked that he's raining threes on these scrubs. But that is the type of shooting performance that can potentially catch the eye of another team, potentially, looking to bolster their depth going into the playoffs. I've seen a lot of people throw out the Nuggets as a potential scenario. I'm not sure where he would fit into Denver's rotation. As a Nuggets fan, I love that. Having Roddy on my team, I'd get a jersey, all of that. For what's best for Roddy's career, I think there are situations where he could play a lot more elsewhere. And him stretching the floor and hitting threes like that's a big part of it. He's been a little bit inconsistent as a 3-point shooter in his NBA career. But where I thought he had really been thriving with Atlanta was in the 2-point game. He's driving on people, he's getting to the rim. I thought he had kind of found a nice role there. So I was surprised when they ultimately moved on from him. But I think he'll land on his feet here with another team, whether that be an off season or, down the stretch. We'll see kind of what happens there. The last thing I'll say, and I intentionally left this for the end because I didn't want to go on and on about this and also potentially derail the entire show. But I, like all of you, found it interesting that in the recent report by Sean Keeler of the Denver Post, he talked to Jay Norvell at a donor event the other night. Norvell did not confirm publicly at this time that there will be an offensive play caller. I have been reporting for a month now that Matt Mumme, who has been elevated to passing game coordinator and title, will be the play caller for CSU. When I read this, I reached out to my sources, the people who I trust and stand behind, who would know. They still claim it's going to be Mumme. So I stand behind my reporting. Why would Norvell be potentially coy about it? I don't know. I cannot speak for him. I don't know what the deal is with this. It's been weird. It's possible that he changed his mind. If that were the case, I think my sources would have let me know by now. It's possible he views this as a strategic decision, competitively, potentially. I think it's possible and potentially the most likely that it's more like pride and ego. All these coaches, especially somebody who's been a play caller throughout his career, especially like if this was a move that was maybe nudged from the administration or something like that. Maybe he's not all that stoked on the situation. Again, I don't know. I can't speak for him. I do know that coaches don't always tell the entire truth publicly. I know that sometimes the reasoning that they put certain information out and hold certain information back, like I understand there's a whole gamesmanship process that can go on there. I am saying that, as of Thursday, February 13th here at almost 11 a.m., I stand by what I have been reporting for a month, which is that Matt Mumme will be the offensive play caller for CSU football. I've been now told it from people outside the program, who I've been told it from sources I certainly trust from inside the program. I've heard it from families of players who have been told that. So again, is it possible that something changes between now and September and that doesn't ultimately come to fruition? Yes. If I hear that, if my sources then be like, yo, what we've been telling you, something changed, I'll be the first to come on here and let you know it. I'm just trying to keep everybody as informed as possible. Again, do I think this situation is turning very weird? Very much so. I don't know. Again, I cannot speak for Jay Norvell. I can only speak for myself and for what I'm being told. And I trust my sources. I stand behind my reporting. I've been on this beat a long time now. I've got quite a few people in the know. But what is being said publicly and what the reality is are not always the same thing. And I'm just going to end with that. So shout out to everybody for rocking with us this morning. Great show. We'll be going live tomorrow morning as well, 10 a.m. Can't wait to see you there. Just a heads up, next week, I think it's going to be Friday and Saturday morning shows for me. I'm probably going to be on the road on Thursday, but we'll let you guys know. So shout out to everybody in Ram Nation, y'all. Much love. Always proud to be. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.